All right, I'm Megan Rosenthal. I help Bill with these programs. This is another of our fantastic evening of newsmakers and world shakers. I assume most of you have been here before. Is there anyone who's new to the Hill Center?
All right.
Please
All right.
look around our beautiful old building. We're very, very proud of it as a community cultural center. If you haven't already turned off your phone, just do that, please. Thank you for braving the weather. Apparently there is a tornado watch, but we are not going to care about that. The last time, some people had some issues with being able to hear. If you do and you're on the side, please feel free to move. We have a couple of places over here. Just don't be shy about sticking it out. This is the fall season, and I would like to introduce you to a new person on the Hill Center staff, Scott St. Would you stand up, Scott? And just Scott is the new director of development, and you all know what development is. So you will be hearing from Scott. And I have only two other things to say before turning it over to Bill. Bill has a new book out. You're all invited to his book party here next week, the 27th. September 27th. You're all invited. You're all invited to buy the book. And stay tuned for our future events. I can't announce any right now, but there will be some. So please just pay attention and come back.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you this evening. Thanks for coming out, braving the rain and the tornado. As Megan mentioned, there are actually 3 best-selling books that have just come out that are getting a lot of attention. One, of course, is Bob Woodward's book, Fear. The other is one we're going to be talking about tonight, Big Game, Mark Leibovich's new book. Great book, and I hate football. Great book. And my new book, Trump Must Go. The top 100 reasons to dump Trump and 1 to keep him. You can guess about that, but seriously, come on out on the 27th. It's a free event, just a party, a book party to celebrate publication of this here at the Hill Center, where we meet so often. So I hope to see you next week on that. So Mark, welcome back. Mark Leibovich was here for his great, was that your first book this time?
Basically, yeah. The first was an anthology of technology reporters, technology tycoons I did for the Post.
Yeah.
It was like cheating because it was like stuff that was already in the paper and I kind of padded it. So that was like a full project.
Yeah, but this town is a great book, and insider's look at Washington. There are some people who have not been invited out since that book came out.
Me, for instance. Yeah. One of the great things about that.
And Mark held the record in terms of crowds here at the Hill Center until Sonia Sotomayor came. So Mark,
I cede the ground to Sonia, to Justice Sotomayor.
So Mark, Big Game, the NFL in Dangerous Times. I did read every word of it. I did really enjoy it. You have a great writing style. But here's what I learned from your book. I learned from your book that professional football is violent, it's dangerous, is ruled by a bunch of old, obnoxious white men who thrive on having taxpayers build billion-dollar stadiums so they can milk billions of dollars out of them, while treating their black players and their fans like shit. And most of them are friends of Donald Trump.
I don't know if that's true anymore.
Why should I like professional football?
I don't know. It's not a how-to guide on how to like professional football. It's about...
or why do you, maybe I should...
Well, I've been fascinated by it. I love watching football, but I also, not unlike this town, it's an empire, and I love just being able to sort of just jump into empires when they're feeling or looking very fat and happy at moments when they seem like they're very invincible, and then and yet because things feel very precarious at the same time. So I'm not a sports writer. I wanted to sort of get to know some of these people. I wanted to take a break from politics because that's been my life for about 16, 17 years. And the last campaign was a really tough one to cover, and it was tiring. And this just seemed like a great sort of diversion, but it turned out that it was no break whatsoever from politics, and that was before Donald Trump even. I mean, it was like the kind of backbiting and self-dealing and ego and money and swampiness that I came to know all too well in DC was absolutely evident in football.
The front page, talk about timely, the front page of the Washington Post this morning has a photo of Sunday's game of the Washington football team, which shall go unnamed, and with all these empty seats.
Yeah.
Is that a sign that the Washington football team has lost its cachet, or that professional football is losing fans?
I think maybe, let's see, the former. I think first of all, it's a victory for honesty, because the Washington football team, known to some as the Redskins, so I hope that's not offensive to some, but that's what it's called, or that's what they call themselves. Whatever. They've been reporting sellouts for years. They have been saying, we have this hammerlock on the local sports market. People come see us. There's this great demand. There's these long waiting lists, and it's blatantly dishonest. And so I don't know if they were shamed into doing this, but they are now, there's more transparency. I don't know if it was forced transparency to reveal that they're not selling out their game. So this was the opener. I mean, they played. Is this like distracting people? Okay. So yeah, I mean, I do think the Washington football team has lost cachet locally. I mean, especially with the arrival of the Nationals. I think the NBA itself is having kind of an interesting and sort of resurgent moment, and to the extent that translates to the Wizards, the Capitals always won the Stanley Cup, and it's just really hard to get out there. So.
But if the Redskins are selling fewer tickets, is that true across the league?
Not necessarily, and even I think most teams are selling out their games, at least early on. But either way, I mean, it's TV ratings are king in football. I mean, 65% of the revenues in the league are through broadcast contracts, which are exorbitant and multi-billions of dollars, and the league has been printing money for decades, and the people who benefit most are these 32 owners who own the team. It's sort of like a cartel, and it's sort of and it's true. I mean, that to me is one of the great undertold stories in sports, and something I came to appreciate in doing this, which is the power of these 32 extremely old, entirely white, except for one who's born in Pakistan, almost entirely male, largely Republican billionaires.
Right.
And,
No, a lot of the book, and something that was fascinating part of the book for me, was the profiles of these owners, and you got up close with a lot of them, including maybe especially Jerry Jones, which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to.
And you go through some of the challenges, to use Roger Goodell's phrase.
Yes.
Not problems.
No problems. Always
challenges.
a challenge. Yeah.
But in the last year or so, the challenges include a star patriot getting convicted of murder, the Ray Rice scandal, with beating his girlfriend, Deflategate, cheating on the footballs, Colin Kaepernick, of course, taking a knee, and the way that took off, and not to mention more and more evidence that a lot of football players have suffered serious brain concussions and are still today, and the league is doing nothing about it. All of that were challenges that the league had to faced last year. So was 2017 the worst year ever for the NFL?
Not by not by profits, not by like revenues, not by TV ratings. I mean, their TV ratings were down a little in the previous year, but look, I think
Despite that,
look, America has this ongoing love affair with this game, especially as a TV vehicle, especially as a reality show, especially something that captures, I mean, that just has seemed for maybe 5-6 decades the dominant sort of sport as far as capturing the imagination of the American psyche, the sort of our love of television, the sort of symmetry with the field and the screen. It's been called America's Game. I mean, there's this great book, probably the best book I've read on football, other than a couple. I mean, David Marinus's book on Vince Lombardi, which everyone should read, is my favorite book on football. But there's a great book called America's Game by Michael McCambridge, which is just a great history of the NFL, and I just loved it and quote from it a few times in the book. But it's been America's game, and I think that itself will mean it will survive for a while, for a few decades at least. I'm not one of these doomsayer Malcolm Gladwell types who thinks that in 20 years there will be no football. But I think it's despite the people who run and own it, who I found to be, extremely greedy and short-sighted and quite, I wouldn't say inept, because I mean they run a very apt production company.
Right.
Is that a word? But they look. I mean, these are not great captains of industry that you would want sort of leading a entertainment empire like this into the future that is very uncertain.
one of my favorite quotes in the book, you mentioned Vince Lombardi, is, I forget who said it, that Vince treats us all the same. Like dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. Henry Jordan, a Green Bay Packer offensive lineman, said that. And Tom Brady's dad, Tom Sr., who was a character in the book who I just love, who actually was nice enough to come to a reading I did in San Francisco the other night, because he lives in the Bay Area, and just a lovely guy. He was quoting, that's what it's like to play for Bill Belichick. And Tom, his son, there's been some friction between the two of them. He said, Tom, eventually the dogs bite back, and right. Tom in his own way is biting back at, being treated like a dog.
So I want to come back to these challenges and ask you how you believe the NFL as an organization has treated each one. I mean, how did they, it seems to me, or would you agree, nobody could have handled it any worse, any one of them, than they did?
Sure. They have a way of self-inflicting all kinds of fiascos on themselves. I mean, especially Roger Goodell, the commissioner, over the last 6 or 7 years, has pretty much been good for one flat-out debacle a year. Whether it's the Ray Rice
right.
thing, or
start there. The way
start there. I mean, the franchise relocation, in which you had 3 markets competing to move to Los Angeles, which had been totally fine without a football team for 26 years, and all of a sudden they have 2. Now the Los Angeles Rams, formerly the St. Louis Rams, makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, LA should have a team, but then all of a sudden the San Diego Chargers are in LA, and no one really wants them there. And the Oakland Raiders, who should be in Oakland, are now going to Las Vegas after years of saying, gambling is verboten in our sport. We mustn't ever have gambling. No one must have anything to do with anything in Nevada. Just like Tony Romo, the former Cowboys quarterback, now an announcer, he got in trouble for associating with someone who was involved with something that took its naming rights from a casino, and he was completely pushed back and told not to do this. And then all of a sudden the county of Las Vegas sort of threw $1 billion at the Oakland Raiders to buy a new stadium and improved roads around there. So all of a sudden gambling wasn't so bad. So just the towering hypocrisies, just mismanagement, and just short-sightedness. And last year with the national anthem thing is a perfect example of a problem that to this day has not really been addressed by the league, leaving this vacuum in which entities like Nike or Donald Trump or Colin Kaepernick are just completely driving an issue that continues to make the NFL one of the most divisive sports brands, maybe we have in America, after maybe 10 years ago being one of the most unifying institutions we had.
Right. So. And their response to even a little thing like Deflategate got.
Well, yeah, that was
blown out of proportion, or. unblown
Wow.
out of proportion. I'm not
Hey,
sure
this guy
what-
wrote a book too. You gotta- it's like, no, yeah, I should like. I have a bias here in that I grew up in New England, and
I should have started. there.
no, I should. I know everyone hates us and
Pats
me.
fan.
Yeah,
Biggest
so
Pats
I'm
fan.
one of the good ones. I know everyone's sick of us. We cheat. We're terrible. We're arrogant. The fans are entitled. Blah, blah. But yeah, but I'm very self-aware, and if it's any consolation, the owner of the Patriots, I think, probably hates this book more than anyone.
And should.
And but I came to that honestly. Now Brady is someone I profiled for the Times Magazine a few years ago, and he was nice enough to talk to me for this, and I still really like him. But both as a fanboy, but as a human being too. But we could talk about that. But yeah, no. So I'm one of the good ones. So Deflategate. Yeah, no, I thought that was an abomination. But if I spend any more time thinking about this or talking about it, I'm going to have to jump out the window first into the tornado. So that would be hazardous.
Why has it taken them so long to recognize that CTE is a serious problem? I mean, Jerry Jones talked about people getting dinged.
No, well, that's
And-
what quarterbacks for years called. Yeah, for years.
getting
It's not just Jerry
dinged.
Jones. I mean,
Oh,
getting dinged
Dinged.
is like what people used to
But I
call like
think
getting like a head injury.
yeah, and
Like,
I think you quote Jerry Jones as calling it a pimple on a baby's ass.
he compared the concussion issue. I think it was specifically around the film concussion as
Yeah.
a pimple on a baby's ass. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, compared the side effects of playing football, the potential health side effects of playing football, to the potential side effects of taking aspirin. So these are not great medical doctors or professionals, and they refer all of their question to Dr. Roger Goodell, the commissioner, who at least knows how to sort of stick to the sound bites. And no, it's been clumsy. I mean, in fairness, brains are something that medicine has struggled to understand for years. I mean, they're a great mystery, and research is coming fast. But it's impossible to this day to study brains of living people, to see if there are.
But it's hard to deny the connection between being out on the field and getting hit in the
It
head
is
over
hard to
and
know.
over and over
Yes,
again, and all
absolutely.
these people who end up with CTE.
No doubt. And and there's all kinds of, just this a huge deluge of just really heartbreaking testimony from former players, and all kinds of research on brains of dead players, and just an extraordinary. I mean, there's a study at Boston University where something like 128 or 130 brains of dead players they studied had some kind of CTE. Now, obviously, that's going to be skewed to players who had been feeling effects later on in life and who wanted their brain, agreed to let their brains to be studied after they died. But still, some pretty amazing stuff. And so the league has their sound bites. They'll say the game has never been safer. We have 29 new rule changes last year designed to promote better brain health. We're studying better helmets. And look, they can make a difference around the margins with some kind of better helmets or rule changes and stuff. But football is not going to be safe at any speed, and that's a reality. And I think but they're very, very cautious about what to say because of lawsuits, because of insurance, because of all kinds of things that you would expect them to be concerned about when they have a million lawyers and PR people in their ears at all times.
So what does it mean for the average length of a career of an NFL player?
Well, it's short to begin with. The NFL, according to players, stands for not for long. And the average career in the NFL is 3.3 years. It varies a little each year. So it's a very short career. These players are treated, it's the only major sport that doesn't have guaranteed contracts. Most of the players don't have guaranteed contracts. So it's funny. This is an aside, but this sort of goes to the dynamic and how few rights an NFL player has compared to, say, like a baseball player or a basketball player. There's a tight end, played about 10, 11 years in the league, named Martellus Bennett, who played for Bears, Patriots, the Packers at the end of his career, Cowboys, Giants. Really kind of free-spirited guy, really smart guy. He has a cameo in here because when he played for the Patriots after the AFC Championship game in 2017, all the players, they've been to Super Bowls before. They were all businesslike, and he just grabbed the pom-poms of two of the Patriots cheerleaders and started dancing along to, or just waving them to Whitney Houston's "I Want to Dance with Somebody," and it went immediately viral, and it changed how a lot of fans, at least, perceived that song. I always thought of that thing. Anyway, so he moved to LA, retired from the Packers last year, and he has started an animation studio in LA. And I was on his podcast last week, and it was a totally cool podcast. I don't even think it's up yet, but he was asking half the questions, and I was asking half the questions, and it went on and on and on. And he was saying that he had just signed, after he'd won the Super Bowl with the Patriots, he signed a 3-year, $30 million contract with the Packers, had something like 12 to 15 million guaranteed. So that's what he got. It ended very badly. He had a way of kind of wearing out his welcome because he's kind of free-spirited. He got injured. They released him, but he got to keep a lot of money. And he was one of the players who he would always protest during when he didn't kneel, but he always raised his fist. And remember, he was one of the few, 2 or 3 players on the Patriots who did that. And then he did it in Green Bay, and he told me that on both teams, a lot of players on both teams, namely African American players, told him that they'd kind of like to do something too, but they didn't sign like a contract like that had that they didn't have that kind of comfort. They didn't have that kind of security to do that. And Marty, his name is Marty, or he goes by Marty. He said, well, I'm doing this for you, and so but it was very rare for a veteran who, again, has the financial security to actually take on that role. But it also opened my eyes to the fact that players just don't have rights, and to ruffle the waters like that is a terrible career move, which obviously Colin Kaepernick and other people have learned. I mean, in the most obvious way. But I think it's a bit of a circuitous way of saying football players are in a very, very precarious position as football players.
Is the fact that Colin Kaepernick still does not have a job show that there's a conspiracy on the part of the owners not to hire him?
Well, that's what he's alleging. I mean, there's a collusion.
Isn't it pretty obvious?
Well, it depends. I mean, as we all know, definitions of collusion can be debated and are kind of subjective and subject to all kinds of. Well, yeah. Guess who the league hired to investigate the Ray Rice thing a few years ago? Anyway, it's actually Robert Mueller. Wonder whatever became of him. But so
I think he has another job now.
But the owners in the league figured that Colin Kaepernick's collusion case would just go away because, from what they could tell, there was no smoking gun email that said, let's just not sign this guy because he's trouble and he's bad for ratings and fans don't like it. But to the great surprise of a lot of people, the arbitrator ruled a couple of weeks ago that the case could be heard, and that's going to so it ensures that some people who are not terribly great, not the kind of people you'd want to see under oath, being questioned in public, like a lot of these owners, are going to have to do that. And, who knows what they'll say, because there's a whole, as I say in the book, I'm going to write another book one day called Shit the Membership Says. The membership is what owners call themselves, and just so many of them have said the most preposterous things over the years. But anyway, so it's kind of I don't want to say it's a jump ball. It's still probably a bit of a it's probably a bit of a tough road for them to prove that, but it's going to go. So.
One thing that I don't get, and I don't think a lot of the owners get, is the stayability of, if that's a word, of Roger Goodell. As you point out, he's bungled just about everything. And yet, what's he get? $44 million a year, and he just signed a new contract worth about $200 million. He's been with the league 36 years. He's been the head of it 12 years now in his 13th year.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell?
Why? Because he performs the two by far most important parts of his job very well. One, making money for the league, making more billions of dollars for the 32 billionaires who own it, and 2, making these 32 billionaires feel cared for, schmoozed. I mean, he's the head of a trade association. When you're the head of a trade association, you have like however many CEOs are part of your trade association, and your single most important job.
This is one of the smallest of all, right? 32 people.
Probably, I guess. I mean, but the other thing you hear is it's like being the Senate Majority Leader, or the Senate Minority Leader, or the House. Someone running for Speaker. You need the votes of your members, and he's got a pretty small, village of very, very needy insecure and extremely largely greedy men. And he's the son of a politician, Charles Goodell, who's
Senator from New York.
father was a senator from New York. He was appointed to Bobby Kennedy's seat after Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And Roger was sort of running for re-election with him, learned very much at his knee. And so he knows how politics is done. And Roger Goodell has like a little sort of spreadsheet on his desk. And if a week and a half has passed between that since he had like talked to Martha Firestone Ford, the 92-year-old matriarch of the Detroit Lions, he will get on the phone and say, "Hey, how you doing, Martha? How's the officiating? What do you need? What are you concerned about? How's like attendance? Like any complaints? Just so it's just basic maintenance of a relationship like that. And he's very good at that also."
All right. So speaking of the owners, yeah. Again, the collective portrait that comes out of the owners out of the book is not very positive. They're not people that you kind of want to hang out with. As you mentioned, they're mostly old, white, very rich white men with teenage girlfriends. Or a little older, right?
No, I wouldn't go that far, but like many of them have multiple wives. There's a lot of age discrepancy between many of them and their female companions.
Right. Is Dan Snyder the most obnoxious of all?
Well, I didn't spend. I actually interviewed him, and that was a bit of a coup because he doesn't. Coup is an interesting word. I mean, it was. He wasn't terrible in person. He was very uncomfortable. He doesn't make eye contact. He was extremely distraught about the Redskins losing to the Packers in the playoffs about maybe a week before I interviewed him, and he just seemed genuinely just like devastated.
Do other owners like him?
It would appear not. No. He is. He does seem to be a rare point of agreement in Washington among Democrats and Republicans, that being the dislike of him. Some Republicans like Ted Cruz. I think. I don't know. Look, we'll see what happens in Texas, right? But I guess, DC. No, you're right, though. It's interesting. But so Daniel Snyder is, I think I've compared it in the book, the sort of the membership, the owners, to times over the years when I've covered the U.S. Senate. And again, a lot of aging white guys. And you sort of stay outside. They do a lot of bathroom breaks because a lot of them are older. So you can actually grab them in the hallways. That's actually a similarity in covering. It was like I said to this Ken Belson, who covers the NFL for the Times, I said, this is what it's like to cover the Senate, because they always do the bathroom breaks. And they might be in that meeting or they might be on the Senate floor, but you just know they're going to come out. And there's this, I'll let you read the book. But there's, so you, what was I going to say? So where was I? Dan Snyder?
Do they like it?
So here's the big difference between covering about being in the Senate and being an NFL owner.
Yes.
People who own NFL teams don't have to run for re-election. If they did, I would say maybe a quarter of them would be reelected, as opposed to a senator. The power of incumbency. Look, it's a permanent appointment, basically. I would say that it is a problem for the league, no matter what polls they point to, that the Washington Redskins are considered to some portion of the population to be a slur against Native Americans. They will put all kinds of surveys out there, but whatever. The fact that it's problematic should be reason itself to change the name. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are not offending anyone that way. Unless, I guess you're a Jaguar. It's just like, that's not a slur on Jaguars. But, in the league, they would like this team to change their name. But it's one person's vote, and he ain't changing it. So that's it, right? So he doesn't have to run for re-election. He doesn't have to, explain this to anybody. He doesn't have to, talk to the protesters. He doesn't have to,
Who are they loyal to, the owners? Are they loyal to their fans, to their players? To the city where they play? Are they loyal to anybody?
Theoretically. I found them to be on large, just very parochial. They care about their teams. They want their teams to win. I mean, it's Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the Giants, refers to the NFL membership as junior high school for billionaires, and it's true. It's a very there's this level of arrested development. So it's very parochial. And look, they want to make money. I mean, if I were a billionaire, and I'm not, this would be a shock to you. I'm not. I would just. I mean, it would just. I wouldn't care about making money. I mean, I wouldn't want to lose that much money, but like, you have so much money. Like, your team values, like at least like 2/3 of them have tripled in value over the last 10 years. I mean, you guys are just set for life. Generations down are set for life. Now they're all suing each other in many cases, and there's a lot of, there's a ton of like inheritance stuff and estate stuff, and so I mean, it looks like, I guess, some kind of stress, but no, they care about making money and their team winning. And what's interesting is they call themselves the membership, and they're the most exclusive billionaire boys club in America, the club that Donald Trump couldn't crack, and
Right.
he tried, and but they don't seem to like each other. They probably wouldn't choose each other as business partners. And frankly, if I were putting together a dream board of like Apple or Federal Express or Bank of America, I'd probably take maybe 2 or 3 of these guys. And I certainly wouldn't hire Roger Goodell as my CEO. But they have a juggernaut. They have a great entertainment product that, I continue to love, and I think a lot of people do.
I know you have many, many questions, even though some of you may not have had a chance to read the book yet. Give me just a couple more, and then we'll turn to you, so get your questions ready. Okay, you have there's a stat in here that I found just blew my mind, unless you got it wrong, that of the fan base for the NFL, only 7% have ever gone to a live game.
Yeah, Jerry Jones told me that, and it checked out. Yeah,
I find that incredible.
It is, but it's also, if given the choice,
Because they can't afford it?
or they just don't want to. I mean, here's the thing. If someone said, hey, I got a ticket to the Redskins game, it's on the 20-yard line, not a bad ticket, or I'd rather just stay home and watch it. I mean, rather than go out, first of all, if the ball's on the other end of the field, I'm not going to see the action anywhere near as well as I would on TV, on HD. I wouldn't have to leave my couch. I wouldn't have to stand in line to go to the bathroom. Wouldn't have to schlep out to Hyattsville or wherever the hell it is. And
Don't go to Hyattsville. It's not in Hyattsville.
Well, where is it? It's Landover. Okay. Somewhere up there. And it's just like the time I've gone to 2 games, and it was just, and you just can't, I mean, you need like a kind of perfect situation at an NFL game for it to be, in my book, preferable to a TV experience. Now, I mean, going to Lambeau Field, which I did once, is something I'm so happy I did. And it was a great sort of bucket list thing
like
to
going
do.
to Wrigley Field.
It is, yeah. But, but that's pretty special, and I made it a special trip.
All right. Okay, he's the elephant in the room. What about Donald Trump and the NFL? I mean, he certainly has done everything he can. On the one hand, he is buddies with a lot of the owners. At the same time, he's always downplaying the NFL, criticizing them over, got jumped into the flag thing.
Yep.
Their ratings are going down because they're not doing anything about Kaepernick and all. They're losing everybody. Yeah. It's like the newspaper you work for, the failing New York Times.
Sure.
The failing NFL for Donald Trump. What is it? Is he still pissed off because they wouldn't let him buy a team?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of things with Donald Trump, I mean, it's a combination of personal, grievance. I mean, there's a 4-decade history of him either working or, owning a team in a competing league, the USFL, or trying to buy into the league and being thwarted by these other owners, other billionaires, or real billionaires, depending on whether you want to be snarky.
Him in their
No, they didn't want
right?
him. They thought he was a to get a team, and so there's the personal grievance. He thinks it's a winning political issue. It might be. I mean, the base loves it. If you look at surveys, I mean, probably a small majority of Americans think that football players should stand for the anthem no matter what. And it's just naked opportunism. I mean, it's just a way for him to be right in the middle, place himself right in the middle of the great spectacle of American life, which is football. And what's interesting is over the last few years, I mean, the two biggest like real life reality shows, I mean, it's sort of redundant, but like, I mean, not like Survivor, not like, those reality shows, but like soap operas have been American politics really for the last maybe 15, 20 years, and football, because it's a year-round thing. And this guy for the Bills yesterday retires at halftime, Vontae Davis. Everyone hear about this? Like, the Bills are a terrible team. Vontae Davis, a veteran, he played about 10, 11 years in the league. He just retires at halftime. He just like, I'm done. And I remember, and so like, this is anyone who has even a casual familiarity with football like today is like saying, hey, did you hear about this guy in the Buffalo Bills, Vontae Davis? And no one would be talking about Vontae Davis otherwise. I mean, perfectly serviceable player, but like, who'd have thought of that? Now look, when Ray Rice, remember that TMZ video that came out like a few years ago? It's like, oh my God, like for a couple of days, like, is Roger, like, will he survive? Like, that thing felt like that was way out of control. Now, that's a very unwelcome and unpleasant reality show thing, but it was riveting in the same way that Donald Trump, has been riveting and in many ways unpleasant in every single day. So, in a way, these two kind of American carnage reality shows were destined to collide, and Trump wanted to ensure it. And
So finally, based on your own love for football,
teetering love, but love nonetheless.
but lifelong, as you point out in the book, how do you explain, with all these problems we've been talking about, the fact that Americans have such a fascination and a passion for professional football? Is it just an escape from reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's...
Is it believing in a cause greater than themselves, which is NFL?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean,
How do you describe it?
I would say that there's a lot of components to what has made football so great, or so perfectly suited to the American entertainment, taste, which is the combination of strategy and just sort of the almost the bloodlust, the tribalism. I mean, the really like my town versus your town, which is true in all sports, but football, again, I mean, I think you can't talk about our love affair with football without talking about its perfection with television. Now, baseball is not a great TV sport. I mean, you have these, no, I mean, it's hard to sort of see what's going on. I mean, they can help with that, their HD, and there's all these replays and there's all this stuff, but the dead periods of baseball don't play as seamlessly as the dead periods of football, not to mention the clock. I mean, baseball's got as anyone who follows baseball has got a real time of game issue. And I think part of it is, people's brains have sped up by phones and computers in a way that they have less patience for it. But football has sort of managed to scale somehow with the way minds have evolved. So I think it's the television, like the history of television is like mirrors perfectly the growth of the NFL. I just think that it's, I guess, what are some other things? I mean, it's been marketed really smartly. Pete Rozelle is one of the great geniuses of sort of modern entertainment. Right. I mean, he discovered things like NFL Films, which is sort of this great sort of propaganda mythology, but this really compelling wing of the NFL that just really just turns it into a much larger melodramatic story. I mean, it starts with a whistle and ends with a gun. I mean, it is so over the top, and yet it's just, I mean, I'm a total sucker for it. I mean, NFL Network, which is a total propaganda tool, and it doesn't, it's a house organ, and it doesn't do journalism terribly well, and it doesn't do, propaganda terribly well, but it has the NFL Films Vault, and like if I'm flipping around and there's like a thing on or a replay of like the 2015 Super Bowl, or like great bloopers in the NFL, or like a documentary on Roger Staubach. I mean, it's just really good. They have the greatest film library. Anyway, how did I get off on that? Anyway, they've mythologized themselves really, really well. And it's spectacle. It's HDTV. It's tribalism. It's violence. It's something about it clicks.
It's NFL, the big game, the NFL in dangerous times. Mark Leibovich. Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, East City Books is here, as always, just down the hall. Again, I don't like football, I don't watch it. A great read and a fun romp through the NFL and the owners' meetings and Lambert Field and others.
Lambeau Field. John
Lambeau
Kerry made
Field.
the exact. John Kerry made the exact same mistake during the
did he?
2004 campaign. He called it Lambert Field, which was the St. Louis airport for a while, right? Anyone? Isn't that the? What is it? Still is Lambert Field. See, John Kerry. I guess it was an honest mistake, but I think he lost Wisconsin. Did he? No, he actually didn't. I think he won. Did he win? I think he won. He won Wisconsin. Yeah, but still, he should not live that down.
Anyhow, get the book, read the book, and now Mark is all yours. First hand I saw is here. If we can get you a microphone.
Yeah.
You don't have to be as nice to him as I was either.
I have a theory about the end of the universal draft.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that has contributed to the rise of the popularity of the NFL?
Universal, like military draft.
Military draft, yeah.
Oh,
With more
interesting.
people having a vicarious experience of war?
Could be. I mean, look, America has like a fascination with war. I mean, but that's a really interesting question. I had never thought of it. I don't know. I mean, maybe it might have something. There might be something to that. So, I will. Yeah, no. I have no response except that it's a good theory.
Well, a follow-up question is,
Yeah.
when the militarization of the NFL with the flyovers, and
Yeah.
when did that all start?
You know, the flyovers, I don't know, but I mean, there's always been like military imagery and also language like bombs and
Yeah.
blitzes and all that stuff. I mean, there's always been it's been a pretty Republican and conservative and sort of over the top. It's always been one of the more, over the top patriotic sports. Fan surveys always have NFL fans being probably the most Republican of fans, more so than baseball, more so than basketball. What I think is interesting, and I've heard people say that, why should there be any flyover? Why should the military have any connection at all to the league? I mean, I would say, my answer to like when people say, why are these players protesting? They should be protesting on their own time, like, to keep politics out of it. And I mean, you have a lot of owners giving a lot of money to political candidates, political parties, usually Republican, often local when it suits their interest, trying to get taxpayers or politicians to pony up taxpayer money or public money for their, new stadiums. So, Mike Bidwell, the chairman of the Arizona Cardinals, came out full-throatedly for Brett Kavanaugh a few weeks ago. I guess they were old friends or something. So it's like, okay, like politics out of football unless the owners decide that they want to get involved, right? So, but no, I mean, I think the military, I think, look, like, because the draft is over, there's no draft, the military has had to put a lot more money into marketing and recruiting. And I think that football is a natural market for them because I think there's going to be a lot of overlap. So,
Question over here? Yes, sir. Right.
Hi. If I understand, I believe the Packers are publicly owned.
They are.
Somewhat publicly
shareholder owned, yes.
How does that management? How does that manifest itself? Are
Yeah.
they much different, more benevolent?
Well, I much prefer Green Bay Packers shareholders that are due to these billionaire owners. This is like a standard line for any Green Bay Packer fan, like especially politicians. Like Paul Ryan, very quick to say, "Oh, I'm an owner," because he's got like a single share of the Packers on the wall, and like a lot of people around Wisconsin are proud of that. It's pretty cool. I mean, it works. There are a few bigger shareholders. There's a CEO, Mark Murphy, who used to play for the Redskins and who was the former head of the NFL Players Association. I think he was an athletic director at Colgate. He's worn a lot of hats. He is the CEO of the Packers. Really, really interesting guy. I really like him. But he has their vote. So there are 32 votes. Each team gets a vote. That I get corrected all the time. I say 32 owners. I say, oh no, there's only 31 owners, and then one team is owned by shareholders, and then I come back and say, no, but the New York Giants have gotten a dispensation, and they have 2 owners, so it's 32. And then, so they write me all these letters, and they're always so smug and so pleased with themselves. They're always from Wisconsin. They're like, oh, there's only, and I'm like, well, no, but then they're like, oh, sorry. Anyway, but that's how it works. So basically, they get a vote, and it's Mark Murphy who represents the shareholders, and there's a board, and I do live. I wouldn't say fear, but I would be worried that one day the Green Bay Packers, being just such a sort of golden American brand of sports, would one day decide to put themselves up for sale, and some billionaire says, "Hey, I'll give you $5 billion for the Green Bay Packers," and then all of a sudden, the Green Bay Packers belongs to someone, no shareholders. Now the shareholders get a little money, but yeah, that's how it works.
Does everybody who come to the game are they automatically?
No, you have to buy.
You have to buy.
Share. Yeah, I don't know how much they cost or what they're worth.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, come over here next. Yeah,
If only 7%.
speak right into the mic, please.
Okay. If only 7% of the people who watch football actually come to a game,
Mhm.
what's the primary source of revenue?
Broadcast. That's about 65% of their
And
revenue.
it's huge,
and
right?
it's huge. Yeah, I mean,
Billions of dollars.
billions
they
of dollars.
pay.
I mean, ESPN pays $2 billion a year basically
Oh,
to the broadcast Monday Night Football. So when we go home, we can.
So the owners aren't that concerned.
Well, they're concerned only as sort of a visual. I mean, Jerry Jones was saying this. I mean, because he says that it is important to pack the stadium, partly because there's still like these rules where if there's not a sellout, there's a blackout in the local market. So you're going to lose some viewers there. But also just as like a TV studio, it's like you don't want to be, it's sort of like a political event. If it's half filled and it shows in the pictures and on TV, it's a really bad look. Same kind of thing in football. It's like as part of the production studio, you want a packed house. So,
Right. Yeah. Good question. Yes, sir. Back here.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned your teetering love for the NFL. I mean,
Yeah.
with everything we know about the brain trauma, the exploitation on some level of the professional athletes.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point people don't want their kids playing, but they'll still
Yeah.
play fantasy football and watch every weekend. What's the tipping point for you? At what point you say it's enough? I'll do something
probably
else. with my
Belichick
Sundays?
and Brady leaving.
Yeah.
No. Sorry, no. I think I don't know. In the course of reporting this, I came out liking the league a hell of a lot less than I did coming in. But I came out liking the game just as much. So, look, I know a lot of people, they would call themselves thinking people, like fans. I mean, whatever the hell that means. But there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in watching football, given all that we know. And part of the all that we know incorporates the health risks and what this is doing to the players. Part of it is just the greed. I mean, part of it is just talking to like so many people who lost their team from St. Louis or San Diego or Oakland or Baltimore. I mean, they got teams. I mean, they were made whole. But I mean, that's just a lot of people that when you sort of pile them up on top of each other, that are just really pissed off at the league, and I don't blame them. And so I don't know. I mean, I just might decide to stop watching one day. I did make the decision, and this is like a first for the last 6 years, that I was not going to give the NFL any money. I mean, I used to get the Sunday ticket package so I could watch the Pats and I could watch, games I could flip around. I decided I don't want to do that, partly, because the Pats are usually on national TV if it's a big game and they make the playoffs. So that's parochial. Yeah, I know, sorry. But, it's hard here because, the Ravens have to be on CBS when they're on. And anyway. But they, what was I? No, so I might just decide to walk away. I love the NBA more than I have in a long time. I have daughters, so I don't have to worry about they don't want to play football, and so I haven't had to engage with football on that level. But I reserve the right just to stop being a fan one day, and it might happen, and I'm open to the possibility.
Well, I want to ask you about. So we
Yeah.
haven't talked about your team that much, but you do.
No one wants to hear about my team.
I know.
Everyone's
But-
sick of my team.
I know,
right?
but in the book, there are a couple of questions that you leave. A couple of questions about the Patriots. One is, there seems to be the impression among a lot of people that they're tired of winning. That there's no fun anymore with the Patriots because they win too much and it's just taken for granted.
Well, sure.
Number one.
I mean, people hate teams that win. And by the way, the Green Bay Packers, Vince Lombardi was in Green Bay for 8 years. They've been winning for 18, 19 years. I mean, which is obviously a high-class problem. So, but it's
But-
yeah, no, I mean, no one wants to see them win.
And then there seems to be this rivalry as to who gets the credit for the Patriots. Is it Tom Brady or Bill Belichick or Robert Kraft?
Well, that's what's
and they
interesting.
all want credit.
Well,
right?
not necessarily. They all have their egos, but I mean, Robert Kraft, the owner, wants to. He presents sort of the Belichick Brady, like like Montana Walsh was the 49er dynasty, and Noel Bradshaw was the Pittsburgh dynasty, and that's how we order dynasties. So
not by the owner, but by
but the
quarterback.
owners are very needy, and like more than any other sport, the owners want the attention and they want credit. So one of my biggest peeves in football is that in what other sport do we have to do the TV cameras have to give so much face time to the owner's box and their stupid high chairs and their pocket squares and everything. Like it's like Rome. It's Caligula. It's like we can't appreciate these sacrifices of these gladiators on the field unless like the billionaire reaction of like their stupid high fives or their melancholy stares, are full. I mean, the human toll, right? I mean, that's a weird thing. Like maybe they do that in horse racing with like the dressed up people, like in the, I don't know, I'm not a big horse racing fan. But anyway, but that's like a weird thing. But owners need to feel like, a lot of the owners I talk to like to think of themselves as athletes. Like they're always saying, I used to play the game. Like Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, like I used to play the game. And he played lightweight football. That's what it was actually called, lightweight football at Columbia. Now, first of all, I would never call a football league lightweight. It's just not a good, make it like, I don't know, call it something else, like freshman football or junior varsity. But no. Anyway, Al Davis, the legendary owner of the Oakland Raiders, used to wear padded suits to make himself look bigger. So that gets to the vicarious sort of failed athlete thing. There's a lot going on here, right?
Well, he was from Oakland. He had an inferiority
He was
complex.
from
to
Brooklyn,
start
I
with.
think, right? Wasn't he from Brooklyn? He might be, yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, team from Oakland.
I just wanted to go back to the traumatic brain injury issue and the pipeline and the long-term prospects for the NFL football in general. I mean, it's hard for me to believe, that I used to play football, not as good as Robert Kraft, but
He didn't play lightweight at
it's
Columbia.
part of what I think about in professional sports. I like it.
Speaking to the microphone, please.
Yeah.
However,
right.
there's a lot of high schools now that are getting rid of their varsity classes because the parents, varsity teams, because the parents don't want these people to play anymore, their kids to play. They don't want them to be injured. And I just have the feeling that there's a big change afoot and that eventually it's not going to be America's game anymore because they've lost the seed corn of the pipeline coming through.
Or the seed corn will move into more sort
Soccer?
of economic. No,
Other places?
but more economically vulnerable areas like inner cities, like poor rural areas. There could be a shifting in the population like you do with boxing. I mean, like over the years. Although I still don't think that there's going to be a labor shortage in football in 30 years. I'm just not one of these people that. I mean, yes, youth participation is down, although it's true about pretty much all sports. So football is about middling that way. And yeah, I think it's destined to change, but I don't think it's. I'm not a doomsayer in that area. But I think a bigger reason is insurance. It's harder for schools to get insurance when there is all these reports of catastrophic injuries, and insurers are going to be less likely to sort of let teams buy their insurance. So.
I have a question about you talk about the NFL owners and sort of how they're older white men and they are billionaires and they have this need for power, and I think there's a lot of connections or parallels between them and the titans of entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And I've heard NFL players refer to the NFL as a plantation, and you sort of see the same thing happening in entertainment with particularly the Me Too movement. How do you connect the two, and what are the parallels? You also talked about how, with the warp speed of the news cycle now, a lot of things seem like that would have been huge stories 10 years ago or just evaporate. So do you think that this is for instance, the activism of some of the NFL players and the activism of some of the women who've accused Les Moonves and Charlie Rose, et cetera, Will it have a lasting effect, or how do you see that playing out?
Well, look, I mean, football is not, as one thing we've learned, it's not bubbled off from the rest of corporate America. It's not bubbled off from the world of politics in ways that they wish they were. First of all, on the Me Too thing, I mean, Jerry Richardson, the owner of the Carolina Panthers, was shamed into selling his team. He had a pretty damning series of sexual harassment complaints against him that he had settled. That Sports Illustrated did a really great investigative piece sort of bringing that to light, and he was forced to sell the team that he started for $170 million and sold it for $2.25 billion, which, being a disgraced owner of a football team, pays pretty well. I'd be shocked if there weren't more, maybe in the very near future. I think in corporate America, these are people of great means who have paid off a lot of people over the years. Many of them have been prone to sort of outdated behavior, shall we say, and watch this space. I mean, I'd be shocked if there weren't more. What was the first part of the question?
Just about how the activism on the part of NFL players,
Oh.
they're calling it a plantation system, which
Yeah.
is a valid.
Well, no. Okay, so there's this famous quote. Tex Schramm, longtime president of the Dallas Cowboys, was in a union negotiation with Gene Upshaw, who is Hall of Fame offensive lineman for the Oakland Raiders, who was head of the Players Association, African American. And Tex Schramm said to him at one point during a union negotiation, "We're the ranchers and you're the cattle." And that's a quote, off-quoted many times over the years. And the second part of the quote, which is not off-quoted, is, "And the ranchers can always get more cattle," which is, first of all, it's true. Football players are so replaceable. You can, kneel and you're gone. You can injure a hamstring and you're released. And Gene Upshaw, in recounting that, said that he's going to write a memoir one day. I don't think he ever did, but he was going to call it The Plantation. So, you hear that analogy, sometimes explicitly used over and over and over again. And look, 75% of the players in the NFL are African American. I would say, we're like 31 of the 32 owners are white men, or I guess there are a few, widows who are in there. So, they're almost all white. You cannot ignore the inequality here, especially when, a lot of these protesting players are African Americans, almost all of them. Look, I just think that the awareness of this in society at large has to penetrate the league. But I think it's really, really hard in a league where players don't have guaranteed contracts for them to expect to express themselves. So I was on a TV show last week, Bill Maher's show, and Steve Ballmer was the owner of the LA Clippers, and an NBA team was one of the other guests. And I was talking about how hard it is for NFL players to speak out and use their voices. And Ballmer, who wasn't really being that outspoken, or he was being very loud, but he wasn't being very outspoken, said, "Look, as an NBA owner, we want our players to express themselves. It's very important for us that they express themselves," and it sort of get to a different sort of sensibility and trust between the two leagues.
That's how he got his team.
Well, that's what Bill Maher point. Yes.
Basketball and baseball don't have the same problem.
Right.
So for those that don't know,
Donald Sterling, yeah.
was incredibly racist.
Yeah.
He was forced to sell the team.
After, yeah.
Well, why does the NBA and Major League Baseball not have the same problems that the NFL does with the anthem?
Well, it's interesting. The NBA actually has a rule that players must stand for the anthem. There's a player for the Denver Nuggets named Abdul Rauf. Yeah, his name was Chris Jackson at LSU. Hell of a player. But I don't know if he stayed in the locker room or if he sat something. Yeah, so they instituted a rule. It didn't really, nothing really happened. But I think, no one really thought much of it. But I do think if you had a LeBron James, if you had a visible player starting to kneel, it'd be real interesting. And I don't know if it'd be a crisis, because there's a much higher level of trust between NBA players and Adam Silver and their owners than you see in the NFL. There's no question about it. And also the fans, it's a different fan makeup. It's much more progressive, much more urban, suburban. It's just it's much more global. It's a much more, it's a global game. That's one thing that the NBA, I mean, is the envy of the NFL because they have room to grow globally, whereas the NFL is a very American game. It's somewhat Canadian. It's getting pretty big in Great Britain, but Great Britain's just one country in Europe. Mexico possibilities, but they don't care about the NFL in China. They don't care about it in Latin America. They don't care about it except for maybe Mexico City. So it's a very contained universe.
We're running out of time, but we'll have one last question here, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the way over, I was thinking about what to ask you because it's fascinating. You decided to depart from what you could sell 1 million books writing on politics and government, but
Yeah.
this was a really
My
interesting
wife
challenge.
reminds me of that.
But Axios has a piece on their Evening Wire that said that they surveyed 25,000 college athletes, and over a quarter had admitted to gambling and breaking
Really?
the college rules for gambling.
Huh.
13% said they gambled in game. And the new thing,
Wow.
which of course is how many points will we get this quarter, and
Yeah.
that's the bet. Or
Yeah.
who's ahead at the end of the
Prop
quarter.
bets.
Anyway, and you touched on gambling a little.
Yeah.
How big of an impact do you think that has? Because it was a shocking report. The AP did
Yeah.
a big study.
I mean, look, I think I don't really get into that in the book, especially since this new Supreme Court ruling on sports gambling didn't come down until well after I was done. The one thing I'm absolutely certain of, because the NFL does this well, is that they'll figure out a way to make tons of money off of this. And they just will. And and look, there's a whole other book, certainly many books to be written on the plantation aspect of college football. And you could argue that many of them are gambling on their games because they're not being paid. They're getting they're getting a jersey and a scholarship. It's just not. And compared to the billions of dollars that the colleges and universities and the leagues are getting. But yeah, I don't know how it's going to. I think it probably the decision. Just what little I know about it. It sounds like there's been gambling in football for a long time. It was probably inevitable. Might as well regulate it, and you might as well figure out. People will figure out a way to get paid for it, and I'm sure the league will do that. So, but no, it's like England right now. I guess there's a lot of it's pretty ingrained into how sports are reported on and followed.
So the one thing we didn't.
Yeah. Give him one more question, Bill.
Sure. One more question here.
Question.
Yes,
Okay.
okay,
Actually,
sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
My question is a follow-up on Me Too. I've been just shocked that the league has been able to mostly insulate itself from that movement, especially the way they treat the cheerleaders.
Yeah,
Did that come up in your
Not
reporting
really,
at all?
but there's been some great reporting in the last 6 months. And I guess was it the Washington Post? Washington Post did some great stuff.
There's a great piece on the Patriots cheerleaders.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sure they are model citizens. No, look, cheerleaders. Yeah, no, well, they're Redskins cheerleaders. That was in the Post, right? Who was it? The Buffalo. Well, they all have goofy names that are I always think they're goofy. But no, but who was it in the Post that did that? No, but the Redskins had who was it? It was anyway, bad stuff with cheerleaders. No, I think like much of corporate America, I don't think the NFL will be cordoned off much longer. Les Moonves might be the who, by the way, he's at so many of these football games. He was a big proponent of making sure CBS was right in the middle of the NFL broadcast contracts.
Yeah.
Very good friends with a lot of the owners. Robert Kraft is on the CBS board. But no, I think that we'll be just seeing more. I think if we were to have this conversation in 2 years, I'd be shocked if there weren't, numerous more examples. So
Now, the one story we didn't get to tonight is Mark's last visit with Jerry Jones on the bus, and we don't have time to tell you that story. That's why another reason why you have to buy the book and learn about that story, which Mark may be ashamed to tell you.
Yeah, I would much rather you just read it instead of having to sit here and tell.
But great book, folks. Again, East City, right down the hall here. Get a copy of the book, get it signed by Mark, and thank you, Mark Leibovich.
I love coming here. This was a great event last time, great event this time, and I'll come back anytime.
Great crowd.
Thank you for coming.
Don't forget, 27th. Come on down and have fun with the book party. Hey, thanks, man.
Thanks, Bill.